right, welcome back to another edition of Roof Talk. Today, I have Anna Anderson with me, and she is the CEO of Art Unlimited. What does that have to do with roofing? I bet you're saying. Well, Anna's got a long reputation in this industry and has a tremendous amount of knowledge when it comes to roofing, including being involved in a number of different organizations around roofing, including Women in Roofing. And I'll let her sort of tell you the rest. Anna, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to discover some new opportunities for contractors as they listen to us as we kind of navigate the conversation today.
Absolutely. Well, tell us a little bit how, I mean, you have an ad agency, right? You have a design firm. How does that apply to roofing? Make the
Yeah.
connection for us.
Yeah, no, great question. So we began providing marketing services to roofing contractors and contractors in general over 15 years ago. My father started the agency in 1982, and the company has evolved over time. Today, we provide most of our services to construction-based accounts that maybe are directly installers, maybe they're manufacturers, associations, or known partners of the industries that we serve. And so it gives us a really good comprehensive picture on what's happening within the roofing landscape, what's happening within the exterior home remodeling or in the commercial building envelope space. So it's a fun place to be. And so you say, what part does Art Unlimited have in that? Not only do we provide advertising solutions, both traditional, digital, and then also when it comes to development or custom application, we always look at how can we give back. One of our core values is to give back to the community that serves us so well, right? Keeps us alive. And so we do that through a variety of different initiatives. And one of them is, you named, sitting on the executive committee of National Women in Roofing. It's a boatload of work, I'm going to be honest, but it gives back so much to the industry. So if we can do that, let's do it at the highest level. I sat at the president seat for roofing, roofing technology think tank. That was a pleasure to sit there for 2 years, and now I just advise. And the list goes on. I have some other initiatives. I want to put those feathers in my cap. I think the big thing is, as a business owner and as a business in general, we always have to say, what can we do to give back, right? When you give, more will be given back to you. So we really try and live that model.
That's amazing. Let's talk a little bit about the marketing side of this. I want to talk about both marketing and technology. First, marketing, and let's talk about the market in general. Obviously, the situation has changed a little bit here in the last 6 months or so. Maybe you could give us your take on that, being that you've got your pulse, your finger on the pulse of where roofing is moving right now.
Yeah. Well, I think the economy as a whole has been poised for a realignment for quite some time. And now we're in the middle of that, right? So here it is, second quarter of 23. We have a couple of quarters ahead of us that could be fairly rocky. But the great thing about the industry that we're in, roofing and construction, is we have possible catastrophic events, right? Weather events can completely transform the economy that the roofer will survive off of. So you get a massive storm roll through. Yes, the economy is a factor, but people need to keep their homes safe and dry, their buildings safe and dry. So there's two things to be aware of as a business owner or someone listening to this in the roofing or construction field. You have to be aware of what's happening within the economy and make sure, I look at it from a marketing lens, that you don't constrict too much that you're not visible. Because your brand is critical to your company's stability. So maintain and manage that well. But then also that caveat of what happens if a storm or catastrophic event occurs, you have to have the plans in place to scale quickly. And I think that's where we get into the opportunity of, do you have the right partners that you can call on in your time of need, and can they scale quickly? And then also, do you have the right tech stack that has the ability to scale quickly, right? That kind of elastic tech stack. So those are great things to look at as you're downsizing and saying, okay, we recognize there's maybe some components that the economy is going to play a real factor here, but don't downscale to the point where you don't have the ability to scale up quickly.
I think that's such a good point. And I think it's a little bit unique in that we had capacity problems before all this happened, where we had trouble hiring people anyways. So many times we've become more efficient. We've got used to working with less than what we felt were optimal levels of staffing. And some of this is just really about adjusting your business to right sizing it. I think there's been a lot of stress and pressure. We have one client right now for my consulting firm, and it's like we're sort of afraid that people will leave, right? Because we've struggled for so long to get the people we have, and now it's like, oh, we finally have the right team. What do we need to do to retain them and to keep them on board and leave the capacity in the business for opportunity? And I think that's one of the things that's really difficult for business owners to understand is that when opportunity comes along, if you don't have the capacity to embrace that opportunity, then you're going to lose out on that.
Right.
And to your point, weather in particular, we've all seen lots more crazy weather patterns the last few years. It's something that we can almost anticipate is going to happen. And we have to be prepared for that and have our bench ready to go of people and resources and tools that are going to help us get there. I also think it's really important. You mentioned it briefly, but I'd like to dig a little deeper into this, and that is the tech stack. I think what happens so many times with so many businesses is that sales covers all sins. And when things are going really, really good, we're like, well, we don't really need a quoting software. Do we really need to do door knocking? Do we really need to do these things? Because the phone is just ringing all the time. And what tends to happen is the phone stops ringing and we sort of forget about that. And we keep doing the work that's in the pipeline. And then we reach some point where we go, oh, wait a second, like we don't have any new business. And you're really stuck in this trap. But I think one of the things that a tech stack can do there is it can really bring efficiency into your organization so that you can, to your point, you can scale up and down based upon fluctuations in the market. So let's talk a little bit about that tech stack. What does that look like for a roofing contractor? Not really a tech business, right? But how does a roofing contractor adopt and embrace tech? And what areas should they be thinking about that?
Yeah. So a tech stack is, in the basic form, is a variety of different pieces of software that integrate. They share data that can stream efficiently through from one element to the next element without disturbance, and its integrity is sustained. So when we look at the tech stack, I strongly recommend you look at it through the different quadrants of your business. You're going to obviously need a CRM. That's your kind of center of your spoke. And then you're going to look at marketing. You're going to look at your operations. You're going to look at your communication channels, your accounting, and obviously sales. Let's not forget them, right? And so all of these different elements of your business, and most individuals can kind of look around and say, well, there's only two of us, or maybe you have the luxury of having well over 100 staff members. What are those key roles that are fulfilled within your company? And then say, okay, what is the software that's available for them to function at their optimum level? And then begin to map what are the data points that need to effectively flow from one to the other without modification. That's where you begin to say, okay, we can build a tech stack that will allow us to be more proficient. Maybe in the event of that perfect storm or catastrophic event, you may need to scale quickly. And that's where the tech stack, having the ability for content or information to flow seamlessly through all of those different levels, allows you to scale quickly. And so this is a project that I worked on with a major manufacturer, Owens Corning, and a variety of different partners came together and said, okay, this is a known issue within the industry. How do we say, hey, let's open up our back door and figure out how we can talk between each other, because there's so much friction between software providers that they say, well, our data is proprietary. No, not actually. Your name is not proprietary of
Yeah.
the customer, right? The customer's contact information isn't proprietary. And we begin to look at tech giants such as Google and Microsoft and the list, Salesforce, Dynamics, the list goes on, right? They understand the importance of frictionless passageway of key points of data. And so that is where I think the industry is really beginning to rise up and say, okay, yeah, we need to come to that same level as well. And it's a great opportunity for contractors to say, maybe if I'm downsizing, do I rather look at technology opportunities to put in place so we can harness our current team? Because as you referenced, you've got the dream team,
Yeah.
right? Harness that dream team to their optimum levels. And now we have this really exciting thing happening where AI is beginning to break the mold of everything that we once thought was optimum.
I love that. I think it's really important for everybody to understand what you're talking about from the sense of improving the capacity of the business, the ability for more throughput to go through, for more jobs to happen, and creating individuals inside your organization that are augmented by technology. And when I talk about this in relationship to AI, people start to think I'm talking about brain implants and stuff. I'm really not. I'm talking about things like this. Right? Talk about the closest thing we have to a brain implant. This is about 1 millimeter away from the inside of your skull. And we use it all the time as a tool. And I think if we think about these things, in the roofing business, if you think about a roofing hammer, isn't it funny that we almost extend our reach? It becomes part of our body. We know where it's going to hit. It's an extension of us. If we're raking with a rake, we can sort of feel the movement of that. You ever back your car into your garage and you sort of feel the size of the car around you?
Yep.
You sort of understand how this tool works. You can do the same thing with technology. And I think you got to make that little bit of leap in your head. You got to think about that hammer. You have to think about your proficiency in swinging that thing and always hitting the nail. And you need to be able to say, what if that was a piece of technology that was doing that was automatically sending emails to my customers for follow-up, that was reminding me of things in my schedule, that had my projects all lined out in a project management software. We're deploying Monday.com here inside my company. And it's really interesting to be able to look at those dashboards and say, oh, wait, we can't do that project next week. No, we have to move it to the following week because we have a little bit too much going on. So this ability to sort of augment individuals inside your organization to make them more efficient. If you think back to the earliest times, it was a calculator for our grandparents, for accountants to use a calculator versus trying to do long form math.
Right.
So you embracing these tools and using these tools. And it's very easy for us when something first comes out. I think I even said it probably 25 years ago. I'm not carrying around a phone all day long. Like, that's crazy. Well, guess what? I carry around a phone all day long. So we've augmented ourselves. And it's, yes, I can understand the need for people to want to fight against this and push back a little bit on it. But by embracing those things, we actually become better ourselves and we become more efficient. We become more profitable. Let's talk for a moment about AI. Are you seeing AI integration into this industry just yet? Or is it still, like many industries, just a concept or a theory?
It's definitely in its infancy. But what I see is it's going to take over many different places of what we have deemed as standard best practices, right? And so AI from the sales perspective, we're beginning to see rollouts from software vendors where they're saying we have the ability to pre-qualify this opportunity based off of some artificial intelligence components. And I think the big buzz is the chatbots and the ability to create content or to be able to have human-based interaction. And yet AI is so much further than that. It's where we really have the ability for AI to integrate with every one of those quadrants of our company. So I think the key thing that we're seeing is, as a human, we all of a sudden come into a defensive mode and we say, well, will my job be stable, right? What does that future look like for me? Because if AI is 100% predictable and able to do things with accuracy every time, what's my place? And I think as managing your team, you need to be able to effectively communicate that your place is secure, but can we increase efficiencies? Can we open up the door for greater creativity? And you might say, as a roofer, creativity, Anna, the ability to break the mold and say, okay, AI does this great. How can we level up and bring the human component to the table that AI has already elevated the bar? And so I think that's one of the great opportunities I see. And I've tried to communicate to our team and to other teams that don't fear it, embrace it. And together you can leapfrog over barriers that we have seen as a barrier for decades, but rather what's beyond that barrier. That's the opportunity.
I love that. And I think you're so dead on with everything that I've been talking about lately is, you really do have to look at it as a tool to augment you. And you've got to be, I'm not suggesting right now you need to turn your whole business over to AI.
No.
But what I am suggesting is that you should be thinking through the use cases. You should be, JP Morgan Chase, I love Jamie Dimon recently in his annual report at the end of 2022. He said, look, we've developed over 300 use cases for our employees have helped us develop over 300 use cases on areas where they think AI could affect us. And what we've done is we've then quarantined those ideas in some instances. And we've said, okay, maybe it could make our call center better. Let's take 3 call center people and allow them unlimited use of AI. And let's just track the results and let's just see. And let's just see what happens. And that's not to say that we're going to roll it out to everybody, but at least let's have a file someplace that says, hey, this is 80% efficient and it increases our productivity by 5 times, so that when the time comes and we're ready to make a decision, we've already done the research. We already understand it and we know how it's going to affect our business. And I think that's really where the opportunity is right now, is to look at your overall company and say, I need to understand AI. I need to understand its capacities, also its weaknesses. And then I need to think about that, how that applies to me. And when I say weaknesses, listen, I think as entrepreneurs, many times we like to do things ourselves because we know we'll do it exactly right. But there's way more value in having somebody else do it 90% right, and you just making that little tiny tweak at the end. That's how you scale and grow, is to be able to delegate those things out. So if I have an autonomous agent, an AI that can do my email to 90% and I only have to do 10, that sounds pretty good. Like, that's not yes, there's things that aren't going to be exact, but there's things that aren't going to be exact with anybody that works for me. So I do think that we're coming into this era where we are going to be heavily affected, very much like the cell phone, with AI.
Yeah, and I think it's something to lean into, but also be cautious about, and have a really firm understanding that AI does not have emotions, will go through the course of the needed output, regardless of the impact that it has. And that's where we begin to have a friction from a human component, right? What makes us special is because we are human. We do have emotions and we are able to feel things. And so I think that's one thing that we need to be protective of as we discover what AI opportunities are there for us. And to your point, you have to test them. And if you're not testing them, someone is testing them. And if they work, they will be the next innovator and you will have to catch up. And so I would challenge everybody listening is, don't be afraid, be aware, and begin to test.
I think that's such a good point. I want to give a couple tips on the testing piece, because ChatGPT seems to be, the one that everybody sort of goes to, and you can use the free version of it. And there's just a few things that I think it's important for people to understand, because it is different than communicating with Google.
Yes.
In the sense that what you have to remember with these AIs is they have read the internet, they've listened to the podcasts. There's an AI that will listen to this podcast in the next, as soon as it goes live, there's 15 or 20 AIs and it will learn things, and it will learn inflections, and it will learn, and although it can't express emotion, you have to keep in mind that it is part of its data set. So what we tend to do when we're crafting inquiries to it is we're speaking to it a little bit more like a human. I tend to say please and thank you a lot, and people say you don't have to do that with a machine. And I say, well, but if the machine is programmed and understand that please and thank you are part of the vernacular, then communicating with it in a way that is similar to its programming is actually quite helpful. And I do tend to get more sincere sort of inquiries from it, because I'll be a little bit politer. I'll say, hey, look, I want you to understand that the audience here might be really frustrated. And that means that they might be on edge and they might not want to hear this message. So how do we tone it down just a little bit? I love to use percentages. I'll say, I really like that last thing that you wrote for me, but I feel like it should be 20% funnier or 30% more professional. And those things tend to work. There's also some hacks around things like IQ and zip code. So there's a lot of these little hacks that you can find that can help make you more efficient, but you do have to think almost a little bit like a researcher. And you have to keep inquiring. I tell people this all the time. I never ask a question that's less than 50 to 75 words. I always want to be really ask a lot. And then I never accept the first answer. I always say, yeah, that's interesting, but what if? But would you do that? I mean, my new book is a great example. It did all the editing for it, and it named the book. I said, give me a name of a word that's never been used before that summarizes this book. And it came up with the word adaptagility. And I was like, that's a pretty good word, right? So I could have thought about that. I could have went fishing and spent a half a day and tried to sort of get my thoughts together and come up with 25 ideas and ask my friends. But it did that for me in a very quick and easy format. And I think that's what the key is being able to communicate with it efficiently and effectively, but also learn from others that are learning how to better communicate with these tools too.
Yes, 100%. And it's evolving quickly.
It sure is. I got to tell you, it is evolving quickly. And it's funny. I have a show that is specifically about AI, and we wanted to start doing a weekly news show. And I partnered with some TikTok influencers that are very influential in the AI space. And we sat down last week and realized that if we do a weekly show, it's irrelevant. Every week it's irrelevant. So we had to stop producing this show, because we were like, when our people are gathering the things to talk about throughout the week, by the time Friday comes along, the stuff from Monday is so outdated that it's not even relevant anymore. So we're like, okay, scratch that. We need to come up with another idea, which is, I don't know if change has ever become a constant like this, where change is happening this quickly. It's both exciting, but it is terrifying, to your point. It's terrifying if you are actively ignoring it,
right?
Right? It's one thing to passively ignore it and not know that it's there, but we all know that it's there, and it's worth taking that step to see if it's something that's going to help you.
Yeah, just the awareness. And I think so many contractors or people in the construction space have had that stability of these tried and true skilled trades. And all of a sudden we have this massive disruption that's happening, and will continue to happen and evolve, because there's no longer many barriers that have been in place that have been unable to be able to do certain types of jobs. We have robotics coming out. We have AI tools. We have visual components. The future is really exciting and bright, and you have to be willing to put on that lens and say, what are the possibilities?
The example I love to give to people who don't like to embrace technology is, imagine sitting on a bench outside of your livery shop in New York City in 1904, and you're sitting there going, this horse business is pretty good. Shoeing horses and stables, I'm making a great living, and my kids are going to inherit this, and you're really excited about it. And then the first Model T drives down the road, and you say, come on. And then the next day there's 2, and then there's 10, and then there's 20. And the statistic is I believe it's 99.9935% of all carriage and livery companies went out of business over the course of 20 years after the introduction of the model. So you don't want to be in that. You want to look at that and you want to say, let me clean out a few stalls and let's learn how to be mechanics, right? Let's figure out where the market is moving. I mean, Wayne Gretzky says it, I'm going to skate to where the puck is going to be, not to where it is right now. And I think it's, it's like anything else. If you're in Silicon Valley, you expect change to be all the time. The reality is, in the construction industry, we don't expect to happen this quickly. And I am concerned that if you're not paying attention, you're going to get a little blindsided, right? Because somebody is going to adopt it and start to roll the industry
100%.
up. And it's going to be problematic. And so I think that's just, we've talked about that a good bit, but it is an important topic right now to make sure that you are embracing this. Let's talk for the last couple minutes about marketing. What do you see successful companies doing versus the average, right? Because there's always a normal standard distribution, right? Most companies do it one way, but there's exceptional examples out there of companies that are doing a really good job. Is there any lessons from that, Anna, that maybe our contractors could adopt to think differently about their marketing?
Well, I think we've kind of laid the foundation for what my recommendations are going to be. Is historically, contractors have said, let's do marketing. And they really just kind of throw out a net and say, it's going to catch leads, and leads are going to come to me because I do great work, right? And over the years, 3 to 5 years, we've seen that digital evolution. And there's a massive transformation of, hey, leads aren't as strong as they were. And so we're going into that and are in a soft market across the United States. And so we are seeing great opportunity when it comes to that very personalized experience. And it's been predicted for years, but it hasn't been to the level where the contractor has to also say, how do I personalize my marketing, right? Because they've been able to just throw the net out and leads will come. And the advanced contractors who have leveraged technology, who have looked towards the future, have understood for the past few years that they could gain greater traction if they began personalization. And I think that awareness is becoming at a greater saturation level where contractors are going, okay, how do I connect with this individual? Because I can't do door-to-door sales. It's in a neighborhood that's non-accessible, or I am unable to connect with certain individuals because they're just simply not on social media. And the list goes on. So our users are very different than they were. And so we've been heavily leveraging persona mapping. And to your point, how do we speak to them in that specific zip code, in that specific persona, in the vernacular that makes sense to them? What are their pain points? Because their pain points are going to be different than the other county over. And I think that's one of the exciting opportunities that we have in the marketing landscape, is that evolution of true personalization of the marketing strategy and deploying that on scale, because it's not something that has been deployed at scale for the contractor sphere at large. But we have the tools and the tech stack and the AI components to be able to deploy that. And software as a whole and the marketing platforms have enabled over the last few years those features. They had them, but they weren't always available at scale. Now we see them available at scale. So if I was to boil it down, understanding who your target customer is, personifying them, understanding where they live, work, and play, and where are others like them. That's the greatest opportunity we see.
I mean, it's so good. I think the best thing you can do is really just some observation. And I think AI allows you to do that in a much more efficient way. But it is just about knowing who your customer is. Years ago, I worked in a content environment where we produced content, and we used to make cardboard cutouts of the personas of the people that we were trying to reach. And then we would literally have a whiteboard behind them with their backstory. We'd have them named, we'd have their mother named, their father named, their boyfriend named, the brands that they associate with. And the reason is because every time we went to deliver a message, every time we did a sales pitch, every time we wrote an article, we were able to look at Megan Megan was ours. That was our persona that stood at the end of the table. And we would say, what do you think Megan would think about that idea?
Yep.
And people would go, yeah, no, that doesn't apply to Megan at all. Well, if Megan is our customer and we're creating an event that doesn't apply to Megan, who do we think is going to show up for that? And I think it's the exact same thing. Just thinking about who your customer is. And some of this is just a matter of observation. If you've done work in a neighborhood, drive around first thing in the morning. Are there school buses picking up kids? Drive around right after dinner. Are there people walking dogs? Drive around on Saturday afternoon. Are there flea markets? Are people sitting on their front porch and communicating? You can learn a lot about the people in that area by just observing. And, don't be a creep. Don't park at the end of the street corner with your binoculars, right? But just randomly drive through that area and just think about that as you're driving through and say, what is it that make people in this neighborhood click? Oh, I saw there's a barbecue happening. Well, that's sort of interesting. So people are interconnected. Have I asked my customers in this market to recommend me to somebody at the barbecue? So I think it's just about thinking differently about the way you do it. We all want to do the work and go home. You know what? Spend 10 minutes, just drive around the neighborhood. You might learn something.
100%. I was recently at a meeting with some association heads, and I said, everybody said inspirational things, and I'm honored to be in this room. But what I would challenge each and every one of you to do is go to your association and listen. And when was the last time you really listened? We're so used to presenting. We're so used to being in front. But what would the opportunity be if we sat in the back row and we watched and we listened? And what would that outcome be? It's watching, it's listening. It's just taking time to slow down, to speed up.
I think that's such an important point. And I like to end on that because I think it's just so important. Just pay attention, right? I know we're busy. I know we want to be home with our families, but that extra few minutes of observation could really be the difference. And it might give you the idea that you just never thought about. Anna, if folks want to get a hold of you, how do they do that? How do they find you online? And what's the best way? Is it LinkedIn? Is it your website?
Yeah, if there are questions when it comes to some of the topics we've talked about at large, you can find me on LinkedIn under Anna Anderson. Or if you have questions pertaining to marketing, check us out at artunlimitedusa.com. Fill out the form. Maybe it's something where you're like, hey, I heard this thing about persona-based marketing. Ask that question in the form. We're happy to get back to you and say, okay, maybe here's some resources or here's what that program service looks like. But yeah, LinkedIn, our website are some of the best places to find me.
Excellent. And thank you all for joining us here on another edition of Roof Talk. Please like and subscribe. Make sure you go over and check out the podcast and the video. We're on both of those channels, both YouTube and whatever your favorite platform is. Okay, well, until next time.